Hi, I'm Lily Rochelle, and this is Radio Lex, the voice of the people. WLXU 93.9 FM in Lexington.
The views expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of Lexington Community Radio or its board of directors. The views expressed are solely those of the programmers.
You are listening to Off the Cuff. Now, here's your host, Adam Banks.
Welcome everybody to Off the Cuff. I am Adam Banks coming at you live from Lexington, Kentucky. Thank you for listening to the show and thank you for tuning in to WLXU 93.9 FM. In addition to listening on the radio, you can check out our Facebook live stream at Off the Cuff with Adam Banks, or you could stream the show live from the station website at radiolex.us to listen to us from anywhere in the entire world. I am broadcasting from the Deborah Hensley studios here at Radio Lex on North Limestone. It is March the 20th, 2025. The March Madness tournament has officially began. The games are currently being played all over television as we speak. True TV, CBS, TNT, TBS, and we will get to March Madness momentarily in this show. But I want to start off the show talking about something that I saw on the news today. I saw that today is Mr. Rogers' heavenly birthday. If he was alive today, it would have been his 96th birthday. He died on February the 27th, 2003 at the age of 74. But he was born, folks, on March the 20th, and it would have made him 96 years old today. Mr. Rogers was such an influential figure in the television world of children. He is the king of children television, if you ask me. Yeah, you got people like... who's that one girl that everybody likes? I can't, is it Miss Samantha, Miss Amy, something? I don't remember her name, but everybody in the world watches this girl on TV. I grew up with Mr. Rogers. That's who I grew up with. My mom will tell anybody that when I was a kid, I used to have to change my shoes when Mr. Rogers would change his shoes. I would have to change my coat when Mr. Rogers would change his coat. He was such a pleasant man, and he really did have a lot of love in his heart, and especially love for children. And Mr. Rogers, he left behind such a huge legacy. He was a trailblazer for children's television. And he was known, obviously, for his iconic television program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And he was the host, creator, and the star of that children's program for over 30 years. Now, he had the most calm demeanor. He was so kind, and he was so focused on emotional and social development of children. He addressed topics that people were afraid to address with kids, like the topic of divorce, or fighting with your siblings, or getting a haircut for the first time. He even talked about death in his show, what it was like to maybe lose a parent or lose a pet due to death. His impact on children's television was profound, and he helped shape many, many generations because of his TV program. And his legacy still lives on today. And I started thinking about some of his iconic, legendary moments of his program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and he had a lot. I mean, Mr. Rogers was not afraid to face the taboo issues that a lot of Americans were afraid to face. And he was not afraid to face it on a children's television program. For instance, I don't know if you guys ever watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but here's a few things that he did that I just found profound that he did in his program. And one of the things that I found profound that he did on his program that was so impactful was he had a scene in his program in 1969. And if you know anything about the 60s, segregation was very deep in the 50s and the 60s. A lot of people were very, just hateful towards people of color. And a lot of people didn't treat black people the way that they needed to be treated. They treated them very unfairly. But Mr. Rogers wasn't afraid to tackle that issue even in the late 60s. And he had a scene on his television show where it was a hot summer day, and he wanted to put his feet in a kiddie pool to cool them down, to wash his feet off and cool them down. And then Officer Clemens, who was a black man, showed up at Mr. Rogers' house and said, "Hey, Mr. Rogers, what are you doing?" And Mr. Rogers is like, "Oh, I'm just soaking my feet in the tub. And would you like to share the tub with me? Would you like to put your feet in the tub?" And that was so profound, because Mr. Rogers was showing the world that it's okay for a white man and a black man to share the same swimming pool to put their feet in to cool their feet off. People wasn't doing that in the 50s and 60s. It was seen as taboo to do something like that. But Mr. Rogers was never afraid to go against the grain. Take a listen at this scene from Mr. Rogers' neighborhood where he sticks his feet in the pool to cool them down. A black man, Officer Clemens, shows up, and Mr. Rogers not only offers him to share the pool with him to soak his feet, but he also offered him his towel to dry his feet off too, the same towel he was using. Take a listen. I mean, this, folks, this was iconic at its best, because Mr. Rogers, without hesitation, Officer Clemens, the black man, he said, "I don't have my own towel." And Mr. Rogers, the white man, says, "It's okay, just use mine." This scene spoke volumes across the world. And now it's showing their feet in the kiddie pool together. See, I just thought that was so sweet and so impactful for him to do something like that. I thought it was just absolutely amazing. Now, here is another iconic moment from Mr. Rogers, and this necessarily didn't take place on his television program. This actually took place on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. Mr. Rogers just wasn't impactful on his TV show. He was impactful on any appearance he made. Even the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And in this particular situation, when he went on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, he was talking about gender identity. And keep in mind, this is in the early 80s, September 4th, 1980, when he made this appearance on the Tonight Show. And he addressed the topic of gender orientation with his usual grace and compassion. And when Johnny Carson asked him about how to approach children on topics like homosexuality, Mr. Rogers responded with a message of love, respect, and acceptance, emphasizing that everyone deserves to be treated with kindness regardless of their identity. And his comments were groundbreaking at the time, promoting understanding and acceptance of individuals. And it just really highlights Mr. Rogers' empathy. And what I find interesting about this is Johnny, he also talks about how, transgender was not something that was very popular. And it was not something that people did in the 80s. They didn't transition. If they did, it was very taboo. And Mr. Rogers brought it up and said, there are certain children that feel like that there are boys. There are certain children that feel like there are girls when they were born a different way. But he addressed it, letting people know that your thoughts and your feelings are real, true feelings, and you do feel this particular way. Now, he wasn't condoning that their thought was either right or wrong. He was just bringing it to the attention to the public that there are children that do feel this way, and he talks about it on the Tonight Show. Take a listen.
everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. The second verse is very important. What's the second verse? Boys are boys from the beginning. Girls are girls right from the start. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. Because sometimes children think that they might change. They might have to change after a while. And, we laugh about that now. But it's because we had that concern when we were little. Yeah, because you're really not sure. Maybe you become a girl, the girl would become a boy, right? Exactly. And this happens frequently out here.
So it was just showing how Mr. Rogers was so aware, even in the early 80s, of child development. And he just brought up things that nobody else was bringing up. And finally, the last clip I want to let you hear of Mr. Rogers is, I think, one of the most powerful moments of his entire life. And again, this didn't happen on his television program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. This actually happened when he was addressing Congress. Now, let me tell you the story. Now, there was back in the 60s, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, his television program, was facing cancellation just after 1 year. And the reason it was facing cancellation is because PBS, the public broadcasting company that broadcasted Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, only Congress wasn't wanting to fund children television anymore. They were wanting to take away the funding for children's television. So Mr. Rogers had to go and defend how important it was to fund children's television to the U.S. Senate subcommittee. So here is the interesting thing about this. The main person that was wanting to completely shut down the funding for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was, his name is escaping me. I'm sitting here trying to think of what the guy's name was. He was a senator. Pastoral was his name, Senator Pastoral. And Senator Pastoral was known for being this hateful, mean, angry man who hated everything, even children's television. And he had already made up his mind going into this hearing that he was going to cut off funding for children's television and he was going to cancel the program. And Mr. Rogers had one shot. He had one shot to go in front of the Senate and testify of why his program is important and why it should be funded. And Mr. Rogers was asking for $20 million. And Senator Pastoral was like, no way. I'm not going to give you more than like $5,000. I'm definitely not going to give you 20. And Mr. Rogers, and I can't play the whole clip because it's about 10 minutes, but I'll play a short snippet from the clip. But Mr. Rogers, within 10 minutes, changed the heart of this senator, changed his mind, the only way that Mr. Rogers knows how to do it. And he took this hateful, mean-hearted Grinch senator and softened his heart just by saying a few words. And I think this was Mr. Rogers' most powerful, impactful moment of his life. Take a listen.
I'm constantly concerned about what our children are seeing. And for 15 years, I have tried in this country and Canada to present what I feel is a meaningful expression of kids. Do you narrate it? I'm the host, yes. And I do all the puppets, and I write all the music, and I write all the scripts.
Well, I'm supposed to be a pretty tough guy, and this is the first time I've had goosebumps for the last 2 days.
Well, I'm grateful not only for your goosebumps, but for your interest in our kind of communication. Could I tell you the words of one of the songs which I feel is very important? Yes. This has to do with that good feeling of control, which I feel that children need to know is there. And it starts out, what do you do with the mad that you feel? And that first line came straight from a child. I work with children, doing puppets and very personal communication with small groups. What do you do with the mad that you feel? When you feel so mad, you just fight. When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong, It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song. I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop, anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. For a girl can be someday a lady, and a boy can be someday a man.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. Looks like you just earned a $20 million.
Ain't that amazing, folks? I mean, the hardest man in the whole Senate, whose mind could not be convinced, Mr. Rogers, was like, you know what? It looks like you just earned your $20 million. And that was just so Mr. Rogers. That's how impactful he was, and his kindness and his empathy is what makes his legacy live on today. So happy heavenly birthday to Mr. Rogers. He would have been 96 years old today. But folks, we have a great show coming up for you. And folks, coming up next, I am very excited to play an interview that I pre-recorded just yesterday with the executive producer of the Vice TV documentary Red Storm Rising, Rick Pitino. And I'm going to talk about it when we come back. And I'm also going to play the interview for you. Stick with us. You are listening to Off the Cuff with Adam Banks. We'll be right back.
You are listening to Radio Lex, WLXU 93.9 LPFM, Lexington, Kentucky. Radio Lex only exists in our community because of the generosity of supporting members like Alicia Mutanyangwa. Thank you for your ongoing commitment to the voice of the people. To learn how you can become a supporting member, visit radiolex.us/donate.
At Radio Lex, we want to keep our community safe.
Per the ACLU, if police agents ask you about your immigration status, keep calm.
In some states, you must provide your name to law enforcement if you are stopped and told to identify yourself. But even if you give your name, you do not have to answer other questions.
If you are driving and are pulled over, the officer can require you to show your license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance, but you don't have to answer questions about your immigration status.
Radio Lex is committed to providing trustworthy information to our community.
For more information, visit radiolex.us or aclu.org.
With every new year, we have an opportunity for change and gratitude. We are feeling lots of gratitude to be in the very special Lexington, Kentucky. Here's some resolution ideas to keep our part of the earth healthy and happy. Number 1, reduce waste. Use your reusable water bottles, thermos, tote bags to reduce single-use plastics. Number 2, try composting food waste. It's easy and very impactful. Number 3, recycle right. Find recycling information at lexingtonky.gov/recycle and more resources on our website. Follow us on social media at LiveGreenLex.
Welcome back, everybody, to Off the Cuff. Adam Banks here with you. Basketball is on the forefront of everybody's mind right now because we are officially slap dab in the middle of March Madness, or I should say we are at the beginning of the madness. Games tipped off earlier today, about noon-ish. And folks, there is no more perfect timing than now to play an interview that I did with an executive producer of a documentary that is airing right now on Vice TV. And this documentary is called Red Storm Rising, Rick Pitino. And it's a documentary that covers Rick Pitino's it covers Rick Pitino's year of coaching St. John's. And this has turned into a great documentary. And one of the things that I love about this documentary is that it is airing in real time. It is still on the air right now. It airs every Tuesday at 10 p.m. on Vice TV. And like I said, it is in real time. So you are watching episodes over things that just happened a few weeks ago. And the film crew is still following Rick Pitino because Rick Pitino is in the tournament. And I was able to sit down with the executive producer of this documentary, Mr. Tom Farrell. And I got a chance to speak with him for about 20 minutes, and we had a great conversation about the documentary. So let me read you his bio. Tom Farrell. Tom Farrell is a seasoned executive producer with extensive experience in the world of television and documentary filmmaking. Known for his exceptional storytelling and keen eye for compelling narratives, Tom Farrell has worked on numerous high-profile projects, capturing moments of greatness and controversy in the world of sports. His latest work includes an exciting documentary for Vice TV called Red Storm Rising, Rick Pitino, which airs Tuesdays at 10 p.m. The project dives deep into the lives and careers of it dives deep into the life and career of one of the most prominent figures in college basketball. With a rich history in producing high-impact content, Tom Farrell continues to lead the charge in creating stories that not only entertain but also provoke thought and discussion. And I am so excited to play the interview for you. I got a chance to sit down with Tom yesterday morning via Zoom, and I was so appreciative of him to sit down with me here on Off the Cuff with Adam Banks. He has been doing interviews all over the country promoting this documentary, and he made Off the Cuff with Adam Banks one of his stops. And what I like about this documentary is just the topic itself. Rick Pitino, who I feel like is one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time. He is iconic, he is historic, and he is right now having a historic year with St. John's. And I think potentially Rick Pitino will win the whole thing this year. He has that good of a team, and Rick Pitino is that great of a coaching mind that he could win the national championship this year. So it is very fitting that the documentary film crew is filming him this year. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here is the interview that I did with Tom Farrell, the executive producer of the Vice TV documentary Red Storm Rising, Rick Pitino. Enjoy. Happening this week. The ball tips this Thursday, and as you can see, I've got my bracket filled out, and I want you to notice.
Oh, look at you!
I want you to notice who that I have winning it all.
Rick Pitino's going to be very happy.
Yes, and I really didn't just put that because you were coming on the show. I really do think that because of Pitino's coaching and because of his ability to get his players to play at an effective level when it matters, I really do think that he's going to beat Florida in the Elite Eight, and he's going to go to the Final Four, beat Auburn, and win the championship.
I love it. I love it. From your lips to God's ears.
So I'm curious, Tom, where do you have Rick Pitino going in the tournament? How far do you have him making it?
I don't have my bracket here in front of me, Adam, but I have the exact same path that you do. The Johnnies are going to win it all this year. It's destiny.
Absolutely, and what a coincidence that this is the year that Vice TV decided to show this documentary, the year that Pitino is redeemed and gets to be a three-time champion. And I think that that just solidifies him as he's already one of the greatest to ever do it, but it's hard for anybody to argue against a three-time winner.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy that you made there, and yeah, timing is everything, right, in life, and it just seems to have, the stars have aligned here for us and for our documentary and for the run that St. John's is on. It's nice to be going in parallel paths here.
And I'm going to be honest with you, I think that Pitino finds this documentary and all these cameras as probably motivation to win it all.
You might be right. You might be right, but I believe he really doesn't care about the cameras at all. He is so focused in and locked in on that team and what he's doing. So most times he doesn't even realize that we're around until he watches the show and he says, oh my gosh, you guys were there to capture that moment or that moment. So yeah, I think he's locked in on basketball and not television.
Well, Red Storm Rising, Rick Pitino, it focuses on the legendary Rick Pitino. So what inspired you to focus on Rick Pitino for this documentary?
So if you were to cast a college basketball coach in a Hollywood movie about a team making a run towards the NCAA, I think you would cast Rick Pitino. He is that type of character that is charismatic and he pops on the screen, and everything he says, most people are hanging on the edge of their seat not knowing what is coming out of his mouth next. But usually it's inspirational, it's motivational, and it's must-watch TV. So you combine all those factors together and you have a winning formula for any television show.
And what do you hope that the viewers will take away from this documentary after they complete it?
Yeah, what I hope they see is there is not a person on this planet who works harder at his craft than Rick Pitino. And we had no idea going into this what to expect, but this man goes harder than anyone I've ever come across in any business acumen. He eats, sleeps, drinks, breathes, talks about his profession. And it's evident in watching his preparation, in watching his execution, and then watching his communication with his with his players and his team members.
So you've got some time to spend with Rick Pitino over the last couple of months. And there's a lot of things you probably already knew about him just by being a viewer watching his craft. But what was the most surprising or maybe the most unexpected discovery that you made while working with Rick Pitino over the last few months?
So I was surprised at how involved he gets with his players as far as caring about them, both on the court and off the court. There's a kid on the team this year, Sadiku, and if you watch the series, we profiled Diku, as they all call him, in one of the episodes. And Diku on camera says that Rick has become like a second father to him. And Rick has said the same thing about Diku. There's pictures of him and Diku at a Yankees game together in the off season, out to dinner together. So it was surprising to me that he cared that much about these kids, and not just as basketball players, but also as human beings. And so, you know, when I peel all of the layers back of Rick Pitino, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, because the more and more I learn about this guy and see the way he operates on a daily basis, it really is evident how much he cares.
Well, you can probably see I'm wearing a University of Kentucky shirt. That's my team. I live in Lexington. That's where this show is broadcasted. Let me tell you something, Tom. At one point in time, Rick Pitino was the jewel of this state. People in this state thought he could walk on water. I mean, he couldn't even pull up to a gas station without getting bombarded by fans. I mean, people would pick his grass in his yard just to have a piece of Pitino's home next to them. So people love Rick Pitino. But when he left Kentucky, he went to Louisville. It really irritated a lot of Kentucky fans because of the hatred that this state has for the basketball program up in Louisville. And a lot of people have different opinions about Rick Pitino. They know he's a great coach, but he's had some scandal attached to his name. So how did you navigate the challenge of telling his story in a way that feels fair and balanced, given his public reputation?
Yeah, if you watch the documentary, I think it's a completely fair and balanced look at his career. And I think that the past is the past. And time heals all wounds, as evidence with his return to Kentucky this year, when he went back and celebrated Mark Pope being the head coach of the Wildcats. The reception that I saw sent chills through my bones watching it from afar. And he said it was one of the greatest nights of his life, going back there to Kentucky and having that reception that he got. So we're all about, as documentarians, a fair and balanced approach, which I think we do in this film if you watch it thoroughly. But also, that's in the past, and we're now focused with this show on what lies ahead here in March, which seems to be really, really exciting.
And it's interesting that you say time heals all wounds, because it seriously does. Because a few years ago, the last time that we saw Rick Pitino at Rupp Arena, he left the game after we defeated him, and he threw up his middle finger, allegedly, to the crowd. And it was kind of just like a salute saying his final goodbye. And it's just interesting, flash forward 5-6 years later, he is now brought back like the prodigal son into this state. People love him again. So there is some truth. There's a lot of truth to what you just said. Now, when you filmed this documentary, did you find anything about it difficult to film? Or, was there any problems that you had getting access? Or was Pitino just like, you know what? You're here. It's wide open. You can record whatever you want. Did you find any challenges with getting the content that you wanted to put on this documentary?
So with any project that you're working on, of course, there's going to be production challenges along the way. And we have faced our fair share of them throughout the process of this journey. However, what trumps everything is the trust factor that's established between the production crew and the project that you're working on. And I think we have gotten in lockstep with not only Rick, but the St. John's University basketball team community, that we know where we can skate and where might not be a good idea to skate. So there's a fine balance there that you have to find with any project that you work on. Whether you're doing a political documentary, whether you're doing a sports documentary, whether you're doing a religious documentary, you just have to find that balance and go back to what I started with, that trust factor. If Rick trusts me and I trust Rick, we're going to have a heck of a project on our hands here.
So sports documentaries, I feel like, have come more increasingly popular over time. The Last Dance, I feel like, really brought back people's interest in long, in-depth stories of certain sports figures and certain coaches, which, by the way, congratulations on defeating The Last Dance at the Emmys. That was so incredible because that documentary was so good, and the fact that you won over it just speaks volumes of your work. So I just want to say really quick, congratulations on that.
Well, thank you for that accolade. I have to dish that off to the director, Matt Halley, who also directed Basketball or Nothing and is now directing Pitino Red Storm Rising. So there's a winning formula that we got going on here. And it's funny that you bring up Last Dance, Adam, because if you really dissect this and if you geek out on filmmaking and documentaries, there is a little bit of Last Dance in what we're doing here with Pitino Red Storm Rising.
Yes.
The only difference is that it's in real time. Like, this is happening in real time, whereas Michael Jordan's documentary, looked back at everything. This is taking a look back and also tracking what is happening as St. John's runs towards this March Madness.
Now, going forward, is there any particular coach or player or story in sports that you have an interest in covering in the future?
Absolutely.
Can you share?
I want to run it back with Rick Pitino again.
Absolutely. Yes. I would love to put Pitino again as the winner for next year's tournament. So, yes, more Pitino, maybe more of his time at Kentucky would be something, because I tell you, when you get the Big Blue Nation behind a project, it can do nothing but increase the viewership.
I've actually heard that. I've heard that.
It's amazing. It's you can put out any type of show covering UK content, and it just gets numbers like you would never believe. And it's just the fanaticism of this state with basketball. We don't have a pro team. We're not all in on football. but we are so all in on basketball, and it has been a tradition ingrained in us living here for so many years, and I think that's partly why fans just grasp onto everything they can get when UK content is being discussed, even if it's their former coach, Rick Pitino. So let me ask you, what do you think Rick Pitino's greatest contribution to the game of basketball is?
That's a good question. I would say his commitment to his profession. This guy doesn't go out there and roll out basketballs and tell people to shoot around. He comes with a plan every day that's going to not only improve his team, but also improve the lives of the players he's coaching.
Yes, and I remember watching a interview that Rick Pitino did, and he said that he is done with coaching. It was right after being fired from Louisville. He said he don't think he'll ever coach again. I kind of rolled my eyes at that, not just because I thought he was lying. I was just like, we all go through that. When we get defeated, when we feel deflated, we want to quit. So I knew he would get back on the saddle. He would get back on the horse. And I am so glad he did. College basketball is so much better with Rick Pitino in it. And, you know, his legacy, if you could describe his legacy in just maybe a sentence, what would it be? Would it just be his persistence in the game of basketball?
I think his legacy is still being written, but it's the man's ability to live in the present and adapt to what's going on. And so I think the longevity of his coaching career is going to be his legacy. Because you marry that with the wins, and there is no one on this planet that you can put in the same category as this guy, the amount of time he's been coaching, the number of wins he's had, and the amount of players' lives that he's impacted. So that might be a little bit more than one sentence, but that's my opinion.
It's hard to really describe Rick Pitino in one sentence. Hence why you are coming up with a documentary of several episodes. Now, one thing I noticed about this documentary, and maybe you can clarify for me, you said it was in real time, and I think that's brilliant. It makes it more interesting because you really don't know what's going to happen next. Now, what would have happened if Rick Pitino didn't make the tournament, or if Rick Pitino loses the first round? Is Vice adding more episodes to your project the more successful that he becomes this season?
We are. So we've added an additional hour episode that's going to chronicle the run now in March. Our original plan was to shut down cameras after Selection Sunday. So we would follow the St. John's basketball team all the way through the season. Selection Sunday would be our final act, fade to black, and it's a wrap on the season. We quickly realized that the viewer wasn't going to be fulfilled if we shut down the cameras on Selection Sunday based upon what they have in store for them coming up here. So they added an additional episode that's going to air towards the end of the month, early April now.
Rick Pitino said in the documentary, he says that Kentucky is the Roman Empire of college basketball. He loves his time in Kentucky. He knows how special this place is. I think eventually, as time moves on, he will appreciate his time at Louisville. It's going to take more time. He did win a championship there, but I really do. And he said in the documentary, talking about St. John's, he said, I haven't had time to hug this place yet. But I feel like if Rick Pitino wins a national championship with St. John, I would say it is safe to say that that will be the most special place he has ever coached in his career because of all the adversity that he had faced. It solidifies his name as a iconic, legendary coach, even though I still think he is without the win. But this solidifies. You can't argue against a three-time coach. But do you think if he wins a national championship, St. John will be maybe trump his favorite place he's ever coached? I know it's hard to speak for him, but in your opinion, what do you think?
I do. And for multiple reasons. On our episode that aired last night, he said he was saving the best for last. Gus Johnson asked him how it felt now to win the Big East championship, and he had a good line where Rick had a good line where he said, I'm saving the best for last. So that's one element. The other, I think, important factor to consider if St. John's does win a national championship, is that he's going to win it in his hometown, coaching in his hometown. It's where he grew up. He grew up blocks away from Madison Square Garden. So there's something special about being able to dial back in to your childhood and where you were raised and all the family and all the friends that you have in that community, and to be able to bring the Holy Grail back to your hometown. I think that's going to really resonate with Rick.
Absolutely. He'll definitely be giving a bear hug to that place if he wins a championship with them. And you know, when you win a national championship, job offers start to pour in, even at his age. And I hate how people put one person's foot in the grave when they turn 70 years old. It's like they think their life is over. But Rick Pitino is such an inspiration because he is showing the world that, hey, even at my age, I can still be on top of the mountain. So once he, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, once he wins the national championship this year, jobs are going to start being offered to him even at his age. Do you think that with the right job offer, he would leave St. John and go coach another school? Or do you think he would just be satisfied staying in New York at that school?
I don't think he'll ever be satisfied, but I do think he would find a home there and say, okay, this is where I'm